What is up, everybody? I am so sorry for getting this out so late. So I anticipate this being watched maybe in the next week or so. Nonetheless, I feel like I haven't been doing very many that chapter reviews, reacts, whatever you might want to call it. So let's get into some of Maiko's that chapter today, shall we? Before we get going, if you guys would like, you can follow me on Instagram. My handle is Cisco, C as in cat, S as in Sam, CO 213RZ. Trying to get better about announcing any upcoming videos I have uploading to YouTube. As you may have noticed as well, I also changed the name to my show. And while my intro doesn't reflect that, I just abbreviated it, calling it Retired Music Executive Show. I should put the show. Either way, I want to thank you guys who have stayed loyal and subscribed to me. I truly, truly appreciate that. Hoping one day that I could break the 1,000 mark. Doesn't seem like it's too far-fetched. But I win some, I lose some, so it's up, down, back, forth. Some videos do great, other videos don't. But you got to be patient with YouTube from what everybody tells me. You know, it took people like, and I'm never saying I'm going to be like him, but like Mr. Beast or a lot of those other guys, took them years to get, you know, a couple thousand here, a few thousand there. And yeah, hopefully I could turn out content that will express your guys' interest and by word of mouth. You know, hey, if your friends like the kind of topics I cover or family, feel free to just go ahead and give me a shout out to them if you guys don't mind. Till then, I hope you guys enjoy this next show. Before I move my big mug out of the way, I gotta say, just from the title alone, I didn't even let it breathe for 10 seconds or anything, but the twisting Eastburn family murders. If this is going where I think it might be going, oh my god, I can't stand watching these. You know, I don't know where I was when the whole fucking monster son of a bitch doesn't even deserve to breathe air, that Chris Watts wasn't from nor a native of Colorado, came from North Carolina, but to do what he did to his own children, not to mention his loving wife. Everybody who's married has had some type of marital problems. That isn't the way to fix your shit. That's just a sick motherfucker. And I know in Weld County, when he was placed there, after watching the documentaries and everything, that you know, they had to move him because he was going to be killed. And it's sad that somebody's going to put justice in their own hands because you decided to be a fucking idiot and kill your family, kill your children over a woman. And I don't know enough to say, but no fault of hers unless she knew that he was married. But even then, I seriously doubt, and there's never been any proof on the contrary, to say that she put him up to murdering his whole freaking family, man. I mean, that kind of sick fuck does that. And it happens a lot more often than what we think. So, if this is anything like that, viewer discretion is advised. Now let me move my big ass mug out of the way. There we go. And here we go.
Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, the year be 1986, and in North Carolina, a soldier, no less, went on trial for a gruesome crime. An entire family just gone. However, it turned out he was innocent. According to the jury, because he was kind of having a bit of a chuckle to himself. as he walked home. Or was he? Because people still have questions to this very day, and even though that happened back in 1985 and 1986, this came back into the news in 2010. This is a saga for you folks. It's a gosh darn, excuse my French, saga. Get a coffee, grab the Poppy C, and rest those dogs, big dog. I personally had never heard of this case before, and so when I started researching into it and went down, down the rabbit hole, my mind was blown, because this is like straight out of a movie. But it's not, because it's real life, so yeah. Let's give it a go.
I miss watching him, man. He's funny.
So the setting for this one is Fayetteville, North Carolina, home of Fort Bragg, which is fitting because pretty much everybody involved in this is military or military families. If you might actually remember Fayetteville from a story about another soldier I did a couple of years back, Kelly Bordeaux. The main thing I just remember from that one is this. Snip, snip, Nikki! So before there was Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace to sell all your, L shite. Well, back then, there was magazines, right? And buy and sells and that kind of stuff. Trade offers, jobs. Now, kind of people just use it for obituaries. But back then, they used it, for everything. And who knew? Because I always tell stories about, internet Tinder dates gone wrong and internet stuff and yada, yada, yada. Well, that old stuff, if you can believe it, would also go wrong. And in 1985, it went real wrong. S-hit wrong. The date was May 10th, 1985. A woman named Jeanette, who lived on Summerhill Road in Fayetteville, became concerned about her neighbors, the Eastburns, at 367 Summerhill Road, when she heard their baby crying continuously. For an 18-month-old, right? She knew the next door neighbors, the Eastburns. Their youngest was 18 months, and crying, I mean, come on, it's part of... You sign up for that. But this baby was crying continuously, so much so that Jeanette, the next day, May 11th, she still heard the baby crying. Now, she felt something was off. The house was dark, newspapers were piling up on the front door, uncollected for days. The mother, Catherine, Katie Eastburn, still had her car parked in the driveway. There had been zero movement in that house, for days, other than a baby crying, which is, incredibly ominous. Jeanette called the police, and then on May 12th, police made their way into that Eastburn home. They broke in a window, the baby was still there, caked in dirt, nappies full, crying, dry tears all over its face, but the baby, dangerously dehydrated, but alive. Unfortunately, though, everybody else who had been in that house was not. The police discovered the decomposing bodies of that baby, the rest of her family. That was her mother, Catherine, 32 years old, and sisters Cara, 5 years old, and Erin, 3 years old. The baby had been in that house alone for a couple of days with bodies around her. This is grim. I mean, it sounds dark because it is dark.
Don't take pictures right now in this area, please.
So who were the victims, and what happened in the days leading up to this? Catherine and Gary Eastburn met in 1970. They dated for 5 years before getting married. And in 1979, they had a daughter, Cara, and then in 1982, Erin, and finally in 1983, a third daughter. Catherine, Katie Eastburn, she was living, the single mother lifestyle, while her husband, Gary, he was away for 10 weeks, training with the Air Force in Alabama. So she was, in Fayetteville with her 3 young daughters, alone. And the Eastburns were actually they were preparing the house in Fayetteville for a move. Gary was about to be based in England, so Catherine was, packing up the boxes, getting ready to move, across continents. Essentially, he was going to be based in a U.S. Base in England, so they were like, yippee. Now, of course, to Catherine, this was, married to a military guy. This was nothing especially new. She wasn't worried about this upcoming move. She was, she was pretty well used to it at this stage. The only thing, though, that was bothering Catherine Katie Eastburn about this upcoming move to England was their dog. They had an English setter named Dixie, and they just didn't feel great about bringing the dog with them. They didn't think it was fair, to drag the dog all the way across the Atlantic. The dog was, getting on in years, just a little bit, along in the old canines. That works pretty well. And so what Katie did was put in an ad in the local newspaper, just like I was saying to start. An offer, hey, listen, could anybody rehome our beloved dog Dixie? Then on May 7th, 1985, Katie got a call. A guy, he came, picked up Dixie, he called her the same day he came, picked her up, left with her. He was like, yeah, thanks for the dog. That guy's name was Timothy Hennis. Then on May 11th, which was a Saturday, and this is 4 days after the dog has been picked up, the Eastburns are packing up all their stuff, Gary, who was in Alabama, doing training, he called his wife. That Saturday morning. Now, that was a ritual. They did it for years. Every Saturday morning, they would have their call to shoot the shit and do everything. Only this time when Gary called, his wife didn't pick up. And that was immediately alarming to Gary. Like, he would later say he had a bad feeling, like a foreboding that she didn't answer the phone. Now, it's not like he was freaking out or anything. I'm sure he was even thinking to himself, I mean, she didn't miss the call. I don't want to overreact to a missed call. But then as the day went on and she didn't call him back, Gary called the police in Fayetteville. Hey, would you mind just, popping over, having a goo at the old house there, check on the old wife and kids? I, have a bad feeling. An officer went up. Knock, knock, knocked on the Eastburn family home. The house was dark. The house was quiet. The officer said they didn't hear no baby, left a note on the door, left. Now, interestingly enough, this was May 11th. Jeanette, the neighbor, she'd been hearing the baby at this stage, so I guess the officer just called at a bad time. But then it was the next day, May 12th, with Gary and the neighbor both calling again, a disturbing scene was found. These officers, they rocked up, looking in the window, seeing that things outside were kind of weird with newspapers piling up and the house being dark, and then hearing the baby themselves. They looked in the window, they saw it, smashed in the window, took out the baby, went in. This quickly went from welfare check to homicide investigation, and they quickly smelled something awful from inside. That was when they discovered Katie Eastburn. The 32-year-old mother was found on the floor beside her bed. Her bra lifted up to her chin, her pants removed, and her underwear cut off. She'd been sexually assaulted and stabbed 15 times.
Jesus Christ.
Kara, just 5 frickin' years old, was found under a Star Wars blanket, having been stabbed 5 times. The youngest, Erin, at just 3 years old, had blunt force trauma to her chest and her back, and all 3 victims had their throats slit. Upon investigation, police found no forced entry to the home. DNA was found under Catherine's fingernails. There was DNA inside her. They found fingerprints and footprints and a lame attempt at a blood cleanup, and $300 missing from the home, along with Katie's credit card. Police did a pretty dismal job at calling Gary back, and so when they finally did, Gary in Alabama, waiting to hear his wife's voice on the phone, instead got, what you can imagine, it's unimaginable. The investigation sprang up, witnesses questioned, sketches done of who was in the area the 9th of May, early hours on the 10th of May, when it's believed the murders were committed.
It makes me feel pretty worried right now, my wife and I, we live in this neighborhood, and this is a shock. We've been living here almost 2 years.
And they have 3 kids, 3 girls, okay? And the woman, her husband had to go to Alabama to go to school, okay? Hey, she is like gone. She got killed
and 2 of her daughters got killed. One of her daughters was just a baby. She's okay, and she's in the hospital. There's nothing wrong with her just keeping there, I guess, for observation, surveillance, or something like that. I don't know. No one has any right to be killed in the first place, but I mean, especially this woman, she's just too nice of a woman, you know.
Get an idea who would do this?
Well, she was getting some strange phone calls that she
Julie, don't be giving no ideas who said something.
I ain't giving no ideas about. Would you just look?
No,
I'm telling him what he wants to know.
You don't know nothing.
He says, do you have any idea? I'm telling him what I think.
Now let's move to another soldier, the guy who collected that dog Dixie, who happened to be one of the last people to see the family alive. Timothy Bailey Hennis, born February 24th, 1958, was a sergeant in the US military in Fort Bragg. He grew up in Rochester, Minnesota, and graduated high school in 1976. At the time of the murders, Timothy was just the ripe old age of 27. Him and his wife Angela just had their first child, a daughter, Kristen, just 10 weeks old, at the time of the murders. Tim worked, like in the military, what his job was a parachute, get in there, fixer-upper guy, packs your parachutes, that guy. Anywho, moving on. Him and his wife Angela, they currently had a dog, a Spitz, and they didn't want the dog to be an only dog, they wanted, their dog to have a pal. So, he looked into classified ads of the local newspaper, and that's where he saw Catherine Cady Eastburn's ad to adopt Dixie the dog. He went and collected Dixie from the Eastburn home on the 7th of May. Then on the 9th of May, so 2 days after rehousing Dixie the dog, he talked to Catherine Eastburn on the phone. It was literally just one of those conversations though, hey, how's the dog doing? Is he adjusting? Yada yada yada. Later on that same day, the 9th of May, Tim went and he drove his wife and their baby daughter to the in-laws. He didn't stay long though, he drove directly back home, aside from a quick stop off to get some fuel for the car. And that was his kind of alibi for the day. Not a great one, especially because CCTV wasn't really like a thing back then. So, back to the murders. And now you have Tim Hennis, arm around the old wife, watching the news, and the story of Catherine, the Eastburn murders comes on. And Tim is like, oh shit, right? I just adopted a dog from there. This is crazy. It was also reported that witnesses saw a white Chevy outside the Eastburn home on the early hours of May 10th. Tim Hennis just happened to have a white Chevy. A witness also described seeing a man in the early hours of that day outside the Eastburn home, a white guy with blonde hair wearing a members only jacket. They did a sketch. Tim must have had like an oh shit moment because, tell me 10 differences between these two images. Be specific. So Tim, obviously, as you can imagine, freaking out, right? He's seen the family just a couple of days before the murders. The witness said they saw a car that was the same car as his, and the sketch looked exactly like him. Tim, freaking out, Tim immediately, when he saw this on the news, he went to the police. He was like, I gotta clear my name, right? I gotta go to the police immediately and tell them that's not me. Do whatever tests you need to do. Look at my, he had a soldier, served his country. He had a great military record. Everybody liked him. He immediately was like, I gotta clear my name. This is batshit. The police, they kept him for over 7 hours, getting blood, saliva, fingerprints, DNA, and Tim was nothing but cooperative. Now remember, this is 1985, DNA wasn't quite what it is today. In fact, it was kind of a little bit non-existent back then. But Tim, please take all my samples, right? Take everything, it will clear me. Now remember the witness account and the composite sketch? Well, this witness was a janitor, guy named Patrick, and he started his days early for work. He told police that around 3:30 a.m. that morning, the 10th of May, he saw a white man in a black members-only jacket carrying a garbage bag leaving the Eastburns' home. Members-only jackets, the tagline was, do they still make them? It was, anyway.
I really believe in them. So should you.
When you put it on, something happens. No shit. And Patrick will say he saw him get into a white Chevy, same as Tim's. And so the police brought Patrick, the witness, back in. Had Tim Hennis do a police lineup. Patrick immediately, Tim, pointing at Tim. Even with that, now Tim was let go, while the police were like, yeah, we need we could use a good old warrant for this. The police showed up at Tim's house that night, to the house he shared with his wife Angela and his 10-week-old baby daughter, and they charged him with 3 counts of first-degree homicide. And, you know, following that, things weren't great for Tim's claims of innocence, because he just so happened to also have a black members-only jacket. Funnily enough, it was something he had just dropped off to the dry cleaners. Like, members-only jackets do not need to be dry cleaned.
Timothy B. Hennessy of 2026 Lombardi Drive here in Fayetteville, and charged 3 counts of murder in the first degree and 1 count of sexual assault.
A neighbor would also say they'd seen Tim in his backyard, pouring lighter fluid, you know, on like a drum barrel burning shit for like 5 hours. The neighbor was questioned, said Tim never burned stuff in his backyard like ever. This was weird. That's why they noticed it, because it was weird. And then also Tim just magically happened to show up with money for his landlord, his month's rent, and Tim was always behind on his rent. And guess what? Tim just happened to be behind on his rent by $300. The exact amount of money that was stolen from the Eastburn home. And remember, Catherine's bank card, or like her credit card, was stolen from the house too. Well, the police were able to track down to where it had been used. Now, there wasn't like cameras in ATMs like there is today, but they were able to track down when it had been used, and witnesses would say, yeah, they saw a guy, tall, blonde, using it. So, Tim also had a history of money problems and writing bad checks, so it's like all kind of coming together in a big ol' shit pie for Tim Hennis over here.
When Cumberland County authorities arrested Timothy Hennis last May, they said they were sure they had the right man.
Well, we have probable cause. That's the reason the warrants were issued.
What was the probable cause?
Well, I'd rather not go into that right at this particular time.
Hennis was charged with the brutal murders of Catherine Eastburn and 2 of her children at their Summer Hill Road home in Cumberland County a week earlier. Detectives say this man, Patrick Cohn, identified Hennis as the man he saw leaving the Eastburn house at 3:30 in the morning on May 10th, 2 days before the 3 bodies were found with stab wounds and cut throats. Investigators say the victims had been dead 48 hours and say the murderer did a good job of hiding his tracks. In December, Hennis was released on bond after his attorneys argued there was little, if any, physical evidence to implicate the young Army sergeant. Today, Hennis was back in court, this time his lawyers challenging the prosecution's eyewitness.
Now, in 1985, DNA testing, it's not where it was today, and blood samples and that sort of thing, they came back inconclusive. So there was no, like, physical evidence tying Tim to the scene, but, like, it was all kind of circumstantial. It was a lot of circumstantials, though. The trial for the murders against Tim Hennis went ahead on May 27, 1986, a year after the murders. Tim had previously declined a plea deal, stating he refused to accept a deal when he wasn't guilty. So, Tim's father, a big-time executive at IBM, hired 2 top hotshot lawyers to defend his son. During the trial, the prosecution showed 2 days' worth of graphic, gory, and horrific crime scene photos of both little girls and their mother, all looking at Tim for a reaction. He had none. Some would say it was because he was guilty. Others said he didn't know how to react. You know, if he cried out of guilt. If he didn't, he was a cold-blooded killer. The jury deliberated for just 10 hours and found Tim Hennis guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death. Story over? Not by a long shot. Get a load of this. While serving his time on death row, Tim received an anonymous letter from one Mr. X. It read, "Dear Mr. Hennis, I did the crime. I murdered the Eastburns. Sorry you're doing the time. I'll be safely out of North Carolina when you read this. Thanks, Mr. X." Whoa, can you believe this? Someone just admitted to doing the murders? This is crazy! Holy monkey, get him out of there! The X in Mr. X stands for extremely fake. Mr. X now has never been identified. In fact, nobody's even had, hazarded a guess as to who this non-existent person could possibly be. I mean, it's a mystery. It's a mystery up there with, like, where does Barney the dinosaur sleep at night? I don't know. Regardless, an appeal was approved due to the defense's claim that the jury sat through grueling crime scene photos that unjustifiably pinned the jurors against him.
Did you kill these 3 people? No, I did not kill these people. I have a daughter of my own, and I could not hurt any children at all.
Did you do this crime?
No, I did not.
How does all this make you feel?
Extremely upset and angry.
He would have a retrial, right? You got part 2 coming up, and the crime scene photos this time would be limited. Tim spent 2 years on death row before trial number 2 would begin in February 1989. With no physical evidence, the defense now were poking and prodding every piece of circumstantial evidence they could this time around. Remember, janitor Patrick, right? The guy who had seen Tim leaving that morning, the car, it all. Well, it turned out that he was an unreliable witness, and like his testimony was all over the place. Like, for example, he said, you know, he saw Tim clear as day across the street at like, 3 o'clock in the morning. But then they would get a meteorologist in, and even a helicopter pilot in. They would say, no, that day was foggy as shit. Right? You couldn't see it. The helicopter would testify he couldn't even fly his helicopter when he was due to fly at that time because it was so foggy. So it made, the janitor saying it was clear as day. Not that. They discredited a witness who saw Tim at the ATM, saying they had seen Tim at the ATM for 3 minutes. Which is like, well, that's a long time. 3 minutes? To be at an ATM, it takes like, what, a minute maximum? Like, they even did a recreation of it, and it's like 3 minutes is far too long to be standing at an ATM. This is kind of clearly kind of bullshit. And the final, though, key piece of evidence that the defense had, and this is kind of crazy, was that it turned out there was a neighbor of the Eastburns who always went for a walk around the neighborhood at that time, who looked exactly like Tim. He was blonde. He was the same height as Tim. He had a members only jacket. Like, when they brought this guy, when the defense brought this guy in, people gasped because it could have been Tim's twin. So that was that. With no physical evidence and enough doubt cast on his guilt, Tim Hennis was back to being a free man. He was acquitted on all counts, free to live his life, be reunited with his wife, and watch his daughter grow up, who, at this time, was now 4 years old.
Guess it's kind of hard to believe it's finally here.
9, 10.
Ready or not?
A month after he was freed, Tim Hennis and his wife Angela were paid to appear on A Current Affair.
They were out to get somebody, just somebody that they could pin it on and get it out of the news.
And you didn't do it?
No, I did not.
Oh, the end. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And this is not over, not even close. So Tim, he rejoined the army, and he got one hell of a reputation, right? He was reunited with his wife. He rose up the ranks of the U.S. military. He served in Somalia. He served in Iraq. He was given like all the badges and everything. He was doing great. He would later have another kid with his wife Angela. They would have a son together before finally, in 2004, he would retire with full honors from the U.S. military, retiring to Fort Lewis in the state of Washington. A happy ending for, a military vet who had horrific allegations, pointed at him, right? Who had been on death row. One funny thing, though, was that Gary Eastburn and his surviving daughter, they ended up relocating to London. They tried to put, this unimaginable tragedy behind them. But they would eventually move back to America, to the state of Washington, to a town 15 minutes from where Tim Hennis and his family now lived. And so they were living in fear. The Eastburns now were living in fear the entire time of running into who they still believed had murdered, Catherine and the 2 girls. Then in 2006, something extraordinary happened. That being DNA technology advanced. Cold cases were being reopened, killers reinvestigated, and one detective going through the files, stumbled across the Eastburn family homicides. Because of this, they were unsolved, right? The guy they thought did it, turned out he didn't do it, or the defense worked for him, so they reopened the case of who could have done this. But now they had lots of DNA. And so now, straight out of a movie, Tim Hennis, who had been on trial twice for this horrific crime, the police still had his DNA, they retested it, and it was Tim.
Oh my God.
When they retested this DNA, the number was something like, there was a 1.2 quadrillion chance it was not Tim. Like, it was something insane. So, though, you probably already guessed the problem here. What to do, because he's already been on trial for these murders twice and been acquitted. And there's that old thing called double jeopardy. You cannot go on trial for the same crime twice. But there is a loophole for the military where, it's a different court. So he could go on trial for that. He could be, even if they've been in and out of courts, civilian courts, they can still be court-martialed in a military court. But there's a problem with that. You can only be court-martialed if you were an active member of the US military, if you're a serving member. And Tim retired in 2004. So, what an officer did was, hey Tim, got one last job for you. Come out of retirement, just one more thing.
Wow.
They asked Tim if he would come out of retirement. And Tim said yes. They simply asked him to come out of retirement. I mean, they lied to him. They just wanted Tim to come out of retirement so they could charge him with the Eastburn family murders, but they gave him some bullshit reason. And so, in September 2006, Tim, back fully active, military, serving member, and 1 year later, after he signed back up, he was charged with the Eastburn family murders. His third trial would begin in March 2010. During this 3-week trial, the front and center most damning piece of evidence was obviously the new DNA, and previous evidence with the DNA now just makes it more. Now the defense, they tried to say that the footprints, the fingerprints, the blood, the hair did not match Tim Hennis, which is true. There was a lot of inconclusive evidence there, and evidence of some unknown person. But a big thing was his DNA was found inside Catherine. And so it's that doesn't exactly get there by accident. But now, Tim, guys, I forgot to tell you, 25 years before, because this is in 2010, it happened in 85, he said, the night before I had sex with Catherine Eastburn. Forgot. It slipped my mind. For 25 years. It's never brought it up. Sorry about that. Tim was convicted. In April 2010, he was sentenced to death. I mean, it's also worth saying he was demoted, dishonorably discharged, stripped of everything. His appeals this time went nowhere, and he sits on death row right now. The last military execution was back in 1961, so it's safe to say Tim may never be executed, and he's been busy requesting appeals and trying to find any way out of this, the last one being in 2020, but this has all been denied. In all likelihood, Timothy Hennis will stay on death row for the rest of his natural-born life. Gary Eastburn has said he's very happy with that.
Hope none of you feel that I'm gloating over this. I'm not. I just feel like justice has finally been done.
This case is insane. It's batshit. I swear I've never come across any case like this. Woo! I need a drink. But wow, folks, just wow. I mean, Sinead, I really don't know of any other way to end this video other than that. Let me know what you think about this one down below, because, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here with me watching this old video. It always means so much to me, and your support. Everybody, thank you. I'll never be able to thank you enough. And yeah, I'll see you real soon in the next old video. Yes, I should probably say, I was gonna experiment with things last couple of weeks, really kind of last couple of months, and you know what? I kind of just miss posting on Tuesdays and Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. GMT, so I might kind of start doing that again, going back to the old style of 2 videos. I don't want to say I'm going to post 2 videos every week because, you know, it is a lot, but maybe like a lot of weeks I might do that. So check it out. I love you. Mike out.
Wow. I wonder what would have happened if he didn't join the military. I mean, they would have kept on pounding his ass until they found something, or getting back into the military. That is just, oh my God. He got what he deserved, piece of shit. But, you know, you can't run away from your past and shit that you do like that. And, idiot. I mean, to just massacre a family. I mean, he has everything, you know, everything that's coming to him. He earned. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Of course, just here to react and review to it. Love Mike. He seems like one of the most awesome guys on here. I'm just shocked because I go back to look at, you know, that chapter and I only see 1.84 million. I'm not downing this guy whatsoever, so please do not get that impression. But I've watched a few episodes of Wendigoon, and it's actually Mike's videos that I have reacted to are by far and away, with the exception of Alejandro Aranda, aka Scary Pool Party, amazing musician for those of you guys who don't know. Yeah, Wendigoon, like, I have tons of clicks on Wendigoon and over the last like 28 days, but as far as Mike goes, as a whole, I have more from that chapter, but I just didn't realize, because watching Wendigoon, I'm not like entrenched into it. If I'm using that word incorrectly, please forgive me, but you know, with Mike, like, I'm hanging on every word, and I keep on using his first name like if we were pals. For Mike O, I mean, like, I'm hanging on every single word. He's a phenomenal storyteller. And again, I'm not talking shit about Wendigoon. It just seems like he's very monotone in reading from a script. I'm sure Mike writes a script, but he's just flows naturally. I mean, the dude should have way more than 1.84 million. Way more. So go and show him some love if this is your first time ever seeing him. You know, like his videos, say something, you know, comment, get him, like I said, give him some love. So yeah, until next time, guys, I'm out.